Good morning, everyone. So the next topic which we are dealing is with writing a new API. So when we talk about writing a new API, it refers to writing your customized API. You are writing your own APIs, you are making a system workflow, you're making a design, and you are coming up with an API. Okay. So when we talk about writing a new API, you have to always have series of, you can say, steps how your API will be designed, what will be your important components into it, what will be the inputs, what be the corresponding outputs. Because when we talk about APIs, we have to design the APIs in such a way that they will have to be known their inputs, they have to be known their corresponding answers, which will be the APIs will give when any questions is being asked. So you have to have series of information. The series of information can be in terms of actions, input, and the corresponding output. So here there is an example of Crocodilo, which is also an API, which was a customized API. So here when we talk about customized API, Crocodilo, it is a nothing but a timer, which will help you to set time for any task you want to do. So basically it is an internet connected task timer, and the user who is using this timer can set a dial to number of minutes, and as the timer ticks down until it completes, it keeps sending messages to API server to let you know that whether the task has been started, it is completed, or it is cancelled. So basically this is, you can say, a classic example of IoT, which will help you to understand that a API, just like a task timer, can help you to connect to your kitchen timers. They can help you to track. The simplest is like you just have a physical twist. You have a physical device wherein you just have to twist and set the timer for starting the clock, and it will keep showing your progress as it ticks down. So when we talk about data, when we talk about the actions that this devices will give and what they will return, that is nothing but your flow of application. So whenever you are designing your APIs, you should be very much clear with the design flow, that this will be your set of inputs, this will be the set of outputs, and the corresponding reactions of the inputs which is given. So this is your design flow. Here we are the important elements which are there, or you can say which are important tasks when I talk about Crocodilo API. The first is starting a new timer, wherein you are going to set a new time. Second, changing the duration of an existing timer. So if you have already set a timer and you want to increase the length of the time, then in that case you can go for this. That is your second task, you can say. Third, mark a timer when it is completed. So you can mark the exact time when you have completed the task. In case if you think that you are going to take more time, then in that case you can cancel the timer. Okay, so these are the series of the tasks which will be done by your Crocodilo API. So similar way, whenever you are writing your new APIs, you have to design similar type of steps, that what it will be there, what are the tasks, and accordingly what will be the inputs and what will be the corresponding outputs. Okay, so let us see this in detail, but just understand this, that Crocodilo is an internet connected task timer, wherein you have to set dials, that is number of minutes, you can say, set. Okay, and as the timer starts, it is going to tick down, and it will help you to track, and it will let you know when you have started any task, when you have completed any task, or in case if you have cancelled any task, and it will tell you that also, that what time exactly you have cancelled the task. So when we are talking about API, we have to design workflow, that I have already told you before. So that workflow is divided into three parts. That is your task, inputs, and outputs. So the task is categorized as, first task is creating a new time task, when you are creating a new task. So inputs which is required while creating any task, you first need to register yourself. So user details is required along with the time duration which will be set by you. Okay. And what will be the output? The timer ID which you have set. So that will be your output. So this is your first task. Second, change the duration of time task. So when you want to change the duration of the time task, so it will take your details, the timer ID, and the new duration which will set. So once your new duration is set, the output which will given to you is okay. Yeah, you are done with it. The new duration has been set successfully. Third task is mark timer complete. So whenever you have done with your task, you have completed your task and you have marked the time that I have completed this task in 5 seconds. Okay, so the inputs which is required is your details and the timer ID whatever you must have set. Okay, and output will be okay that your task whatever you have done, you have set the timer that you want your task to be completed in this time. Next, cancel the timer. It's exactly opposite of your step task 3. So here again also the details is going to be same. The only the thing is like here you're going to cancel the task. In task 3 you have set your task timer. Next 5, describe the time task. So whenever you want the description that when your task timer had started, so in that case, you're going to have your user details, your timer ID, and the description of the task, what you want. You can describe more that this timer I have set for my kitchen, this timer I have set for my studying. So anything you can set accordingly. So you whatever description you must have set for your time task, that description can be seen by you. Okay, the output will be okay that it has been done. The description has been set successfully. Next, task 6, get the list of the timers. Since this is an internet connected devices, so there will be multiple people who are using this API. So here you will have lot of users who are connected to this API. So whenever you want to know the list of the timers or the list of the users who are actually connected along with the timer IDs, you're going to use this get list of timers where you need to put your details and accordingly it will give you the output. What are the list of timer IDs? So who are the people who are accessing this API at that current moment. Last is get information about the timer. So whenever you want to get information about the timer, then you need your own details as well as the timer ID for which you want to have your information. So the output will be the description, okay, when you had created your timer and what is its current status, whether it is started, whether it is completed or whether it has been cancelled or aborted. So this is your series of workflow. So always we have to remember that whenever we are starting with an API design, we have to design set of tasks and this task should be coordinated with set of inputs and this set of inputs should be coordinated with set of outputs because this is not a human, this is a software machine. So here you have to design each and everything from scratch and everything has to be designed in systematic way. Okay, the API which we have seen here comes with one problem, that is it doesn't have any security. So we need to have some security as well because when we talk about internet connected task timer where you are going to connect with multiple or anonymous users at a single point of time, the security is something which has to be there. So the implementation of API at initial level will just be in a form of a task along with the inputs and outputs, but in the next step you should start thinking of the security aspects of the inputs. Like if any input is taken, so should be secured, there should be some mechanism wherein it should be unique to you, so there has to be some type of security. So let us see what and how we can have security into it. So now when we want to have our API interactions with security implementations, we are going to use something called as authentication. So initially when we have started with the design flow, we had just started with the design flow to understand that if I'm talking about an Crocodilo API, so what will be the series of the tasks, what will be the inputs and what will be the corresponding outputs. But now I'm adding something that is called as authentication because I want my security implementation into my APIs. So now with authentication, I will either take the MAC address of the device which they are connected with or the user ID and password. So this is something a sensor, you can say a security authentication, which can add as an additional step when you are designing your APIs. Because our source is internet, so authentication is very much important. If our source is just for one or two users, wherein we know that these are only the specified users who are going to use our API, then this concern is not there. But when we are talking about a public platform, then in that case, authentication is very much important. So you can authenticate, you can keep the record who, which user has logged in, what task they have set, and you can have on security mechanisms as well. So here we are going to add a MAC address or user ID or password for every task which will be done by your users. So here you can see in every step there is authentication, that is it will either take the MAC address or either it will take a user ID or password. Here there are two steps which have been additional added. You can see that is step number 8 and step number 9, because I have come up with an authentication mechanism. So whenever I want to register my device to the user, so I need to have an authentication. So initially I will ask them that you have to set their user ID and password, and the inputs which will be required for them will be MAC address of the computer or the MAC address of the device which they are logging at. Okay, so whenever users want to register themselves and they want to use this API, so they have to go with a login process, and the inputs which will taken from them will be the MAC address of the computer or the device they are logging at. Once it is done successfully, the output will be in the terms of OK. One more task which I have added here is get the details of the user's device. So if you want to have the details of the user device, that this user ID password have with what MAC address. So in that case, I'm going to use user ID and password. Inputs will be not be there here because both of them are coordinate together. Both of them are saved at one place. So there is no sort of input. So when you want, as soon as you put user ID and password, you can get the output, that is details of the users with their MAC address. So there is no input here required because both of them are saved at one place. So this was your API interactions. So the writing a new API here is Crocodilo, which is an internet connected task timer, which have this series of tasks, you can say, or steps which are to be followed. Whenever initially you are starting with API design, first you are going to design a workflow wherein you are dividing into in three parts. That is your task, your input, and the corresponding output. Since API interaction is something which will be taken over the internet, there will be anonymous devices connected at single point of time. So security implementation is a mandatory step. So here we are going to add something called as authentication, which is going to capture the MAC address of the devices of the user who are accessing the APIs. Okay, let's move to the next. Next is your implementing APIs. So whenever we are designing any APIs, there are some series of methods which are used or which will help you to implement the APIs. So when we talk about APIs, we already know that APIs is nothing but that defines how your messages are going to be sent from your client to server and server to client. So basically, you can send data in whatever format you want. Okay, but it's almost always better to use some existing standards, because when we talk about convenient library, it should be available for both client and server. So to produce that, to have an understanding of the messages between your client and server, you should always go for standardized methods, or you can say standardized protocols. So whenever you are implementing APIs, there are few standardized mechanisms or protocols which are used to do the same. So the very first we are going to study here is REST. So when I talk about REST, it stands for representational state transfer. That RE stands for representational, S stands for state, and T stands for transfer. Okay, so the word itself, it's telling its meaning. It is representing the different states as the transfer is taking place. Okay, so here you can take an example where we have a REST web service, that is nothing but your server. There is a client. So whenever a client, whenever it is making a request, okay, the state is changing from standard to HTTP request. Similarly, when the server will reply back, the state is changing from request to response. So there is a transfer of state. At first state, you are just have a client and server. The state one will be the request which will be made to the server by client, that is HTTP request. So here you are representing the different states when the communication takes place between your client and server. So the basically when we talk about the states, there are two states here, that is your HTTP request and HTTP response. HTTP is nothing but the protocol which will help you to take the request and give you the response back. So when we talk about REST, this is something called an architectural style that actually helps you to have a standardized communication between your computer systems, and they help you to communicate with each other, because this is a standard way of communicating. A client will always request and the server will be always responding back. But the protocol here which we are mostly use is your HTTP protocol. At times, REST APIs are also called as RESTful systems. because they are something called as stateless that we are going to see in the next topic, which we are going to see now. Okay. So when we talk about REST, there are 6 guiding principles of REST. So the very first is your client and server. So in REST, there is a separation of client and server. The reason is that when you implementing your client and you're implementing your server independently without each knowing about each other, this means that the code which is there on the client side can be changed at any time without affecting the operation of the server. Similarly, the code which is there on the server side can be changed without affecting the operation of the client. So the reason of separating the client and server here is that both of them can work independently and they both will not be dependent on each other. If we have one single device and if it is acting as a client and server both, in that case the separation of code, the separation of data is not possible. So the very first step of very first principle of REST is that your client and server has to be separated. And the reason for their separation is both of them should work independently. Because if there are any changes in the code, it should not affect the client and similarly it should not affect the server. So main concern of separating the client and the server is with respect, you can say your data storages to increase the flexibility of interfaces across your platforms, to improve scalability by simplifying your server components, and separation in altogether also helps you to involve independently. Like any task, if it is to be done, they can done independently. They don't have to rely or depend on each other to do any task. So separation of client and server has many flexibility. You can scale easily, you can add resources, you can add data to it. The storages of your data can be differently stored on your client and server. So there are many n number of positive reasons of separating the client and server. This is the first principle or requirement of REST. Second is stateless. So when we talk about stateless, here refers to the communication which is taking place between your client and server is in stateless style. So stateless style means what? Every request which is made from your client to server will not store any state. Okay, so any communication, if it is taking between your client and server, it will be just in a form of communication. No state will be saved neither on the server side, neither on the client side. Only the session information will be saved at the client and server side. But what actually they are doing, what actually the interaction is taking place, that state will not be stored. Okay, so the stateless here we can say that each request that is made from the client on server, which all requires all the information to understand the request, will not be stored on the server side. Only the session information which is there, which will be stored on the client side, but nothing else will be stored. Okay. Third is cacheable. So when I talk about cacheable, here we are dealing with the cache memory of the client and server. So in order to improve your network efficiency, the cache memory of the client and server are basically utilized well, because this help you to maintain the response or request by explicitly or you can say implicitly adding some cache memory. If your response is cacheable, then the client cache is something which will help you to respond the data, which will help you to maintain the data. Okay, similarly on the server side, if there is a cache memory, it will help you to give the faster responses to your client. So to make the interactions more efficient, to make your interactions scalable with respect to performance, we are going to use the cache memory of the client and server. Fourth, uniform interface. So when we talk about uniform interface, here refers to the GUI, or you can say the interface through which your client and server are communicating. So usually the interface is going to be same, and your interfaces usually will be your web pages, because when we talk about REST, that is something which is an online. So you have your client and server wherein both of them will be requesting each other or will be interacting with each other with the uniform interface that can be in the form of web pages, that can be in the form of URLs. Okay. Next is layered system. So when we talk about layer system, that refers to the added layer between your client and server. Here in the diagram, you can see there is a client, there is a server, and there is something called as layered or you can say added layer, that is internet. because without an internet, the client and server cannot communicate with each other. So to make the communication more transparent, to make the communication more interactive, and to be responsive, we are adding an internet layer between your client and server. So this internet layer helps the connection between the client and server, makes the responses very fast, and will assure that all the transactions or all the communications which are taking place between the client and server will be done with less delay. Next, last, that is six, that is code on demand. So this is something which is very optional in nature when we are talking about REST principle. So this code on demand refers to that REST allows client functionalities to be extended by either downloading and executing the code in the form of applets or script. So when it allows this, it actually simplifies the client task by reducing the number of the features that they have to be pre-implemented. So downloading is allowed, even the downloading after deployment is allowed, which actually improves the extensibility. So code on demand here refers to, in short, that REST allows the client to download the code, execute the code in the form of applets or in the form of the scripts. And since it allows this, it actually have reduces the number of the features or number of the settings which has to be pre-implemented before. Okay, so these are your 6 guiding principles of your REST. So whenever we are making an HTTP request that we have seen in REST, HTTP response and HTTP request. So whenever a client is making a request to the server, there are 4 basic requests which are used, or you can say which are help to interact with the resources in RST system. Because whenever we talk about client, a client is always requesting something from the server. So that request can be a resource as well. So whenever any resource is being requested from the client to server, in HTTP request, we have 4 methods to get that request. Okay, so the very first method is the get method. So when we talk about get method, it will help you to get the resource whichever the client want to have an access to. But when we talk about resources, every resources which is saved into the server machines are uniquely identified by the resource ID. So the client, if they want any resources, they have to specify the resource ID, and along with that resource ID, the server will give back the result or the response. Second is the post method. So whenever any new resource is being posted, that can be done with the HTTP request method, that is post. Third, put method. If there is something update in the resource, if there has to be some contents to be added in the resource or something has to be done like this, then we can update the resource. For again, when you are updating the resource, you need to have the resource ID, because that will give you an specific idea that which resource ID needs an updation. Last is delete. So whenever you want to remove any resource, then you can remove it. So the removal again with the respect to ID. So there are 4 basic HTTP requests which helps whenever a client is interacting with the server, they have to make this 4 requests. That is get, put, delete and post. Okay, so these are the 4 requests. Mostly the client will ask for the get request only. When we talk about post, put and delete, that will be something done by the server side. Okay, because posting is something which will be done from the server side. Updating any information in the resource will be done from the server side, and deleting any resource will be also done from the server side. As a client, you have only one thing, that you are going to get the resources or the collection of resources with the help of the resource IDs. Next, second implementation is JSON RPC. So when we talk about JSON, there J stands for JavaScript, O stands for object, and N stands for notation. So basically, when we talk about RPC, we must have already studied in your program networking subject. RPC stands for remote procedural call. So it is remote procedural call are the remote calls which is made to the computers for communication. So here in JSON RPC, we are making a remote procedural call, okay, and which is encoded in JSON language. So it is a very simple protocol wherein you have to define only few data types and few commands. And the reason why JSON RPC is used, that it allows notifications and allows make multiple calls to be sent on the server, which may be answered or which may be out of order. The reason is like, whenever you are remotely connecting your client and server, there is a possibility that some requests may not be fulfilled by the server, because this is a remote call. So some calls may fail, and because of that, the server may not be able to fulfill your request. But with the JSON RPC, it allows you to have notifications of everything. Any calls which is dropped, it will give you that notifications also. Any calls which are successful and they are completed, so it will give you all set of notifications. So the implementation of APIs using JSON RPC is something which is an advantageous. So when we talk about JSON RPC, it actually works by sending a request to the server who are implementing this protocol. The client in this case can be a software which is intended to call a single method of remote system, and all the types of the transfers which are going to be done here, that is from your client and server, are going to be of type single objects. The reason why there is a single object, because this is a remote procedural call. Both of them are not connected with each other at physical place. It is a remote call. So at a time there will be just single object communication between your client and server. So the call will be made. Once the call is connected, the information is going to be communicated between your client and server. So every time whenever a client want to send anything, it is going to make a request call along with the specific method which will be provided by your remote system. So your RPC have many calls, your RPC have many methods. With that method, the client is going to be making the request to the server. Similarly, the server will give you the request back with the methods which is there into your RPC. Okay, so that is your second, that is JSON RPC. So JSON here is JavaScript object notation, because here we are going to use JSON as a language which will help you to encode your RPC commands while they are communicating with your client and server. So this is your second method for implementing your APIs. Third is XML RPC. So when we talk about XML RPC, XML stands for Extended Markup Language. Here you can see the protocols which are used for encoding is only difference. Rest, if we talk about the working remains the same. So again, it is a remote procedural call. So it is a mechanism where you're going to make a call procedure or a function available on a remote computer. We can talk about RPC, that is something a very older technology also, which is used even older than web. But since it gives developers a platform for defining their interfaces over the network, mostly people are going for RPC. So when we talk about XML RPC, we can say that it is a remote procedural call which is done using HTTP, because HTTP is something which is a transport protocol which is used over the web, and XML is a encoding language which is used there. Okay, so basically XML RPC is designed which allows transmission of your information, processing them and returning back the result between your client and server. So if you want to have multiple computed environments, then also it is possible. Since it is an extended markup language, it is a platform independent language, so it is possible that you can integrate multiple computing environments as well. So when we talk about XML RPC, it is, you can say, a good option when you want to establish your APIs over the internet, or if you want to have a platform independence, because it will help you to build connections between your anonymous computers over the network. And the reason why XML is used, because it is something which is simplest to implement. Those who know the basic of HTML, they can easily design or encode with XML. The just syntax is different, and that's also not big difference between your HTML and XML. You can even have your user defined codes also in XML. So there is a powerful language, you can say, and when you are combining it with implementing the APIs over the RPC, it becomes a good combination for implementing your APIs. Let's move to the next. Next, which is last, is your SOAP. So when we talk about SOAP, the SOAP, it stands for, S stands for simple, O stands for object, A stands for access, and P stands for protocol. So this is again an XML based messaging protocol. You can see in the diagram there, which helps you to exchange your information among your computers. So it is an communication protocol that is communicated with the help of internet. It uses HTTP for messaging. It provides data transport for your web services. It is a platform independent because it is using XML, so platform independence automatically comes there. And with the help of SOAP, the client applications can easily connect to the remote services. So it becomes very easy. Since it uses XML, the way you define what information is sent and how can be easily seen also and can easily be changed as well. So here in this example, you can see there is a client and there is a server. So a client, whoever want to make any request to the server, it is going to use a SOAP body, and that SOAP body will contain all your XML data. So whatever you're writing into your SOAP body, it will be of type or it will be encoded in XML data. This information will be encoded into the SOAP envelope, or you can say this put into the SOAP envelope, and then this SOAP envelope is being sent over the network. This envelope will be received by the server, and whenever the server want to access this envelope, it is going to use some parameters. Okay, and whatever SOAP request methods which are given from client to server, it is going to use that to access it. So here it is your client and server communication, and the communication is taking with the help of your SOAP envelope, where the SOAP envelope will have all the details that what the request client has made to the server. So when we talk about a SOAP message, okay, it contains following elements. There is something called as envelope, there is something called as header, there is something called as body and font. So when we talk about envelope, it actually defines the start and the end of the message. So it is something which is very much important. Whatever you are asking, whatever is your message, that will be put into your envelope. So this is something which is mandatory field. This cannot be optional. So this always has to be there whenever any request is made from the client to server, because it describes about what the message is, what the request is made by the client to server. Second is header. So something, when I talk about header, that is optional in the message. Okay, so anything if you want to add any information, any processing information related to the message, anything which you want to add, you can add it with the help of the header. This is optional, so this is not mandatory. So the choice is yours. If you want to have any optional attributes in the message, then you can describe them with the help of the header. Third is body. This is something which is mandatory because it is the actual XML data encoding that comprise of your messages which you are going to send. Okay, so whatever messages you are going to send, whatever request you are going to make, it is going to be encoded into the XML form and which will be there into your body. So this is something which cannot be leave blank. It is mandatory because this is the actual message which is going to be sent to your server, and according to this message, according to this request, the server is going to respond you back. Last is fault. This is again an optional. So if you want to provide any information, if there are any errors, if there is a connection loss, then that you can do it with the help of this fault. So if there is any communication break between a client and server, okay, then you can send this fault message, which is optional, and there you can describe that there was network congestion or any fault which has been occurred while processing the message. So overall, when we talk about SOAP architecture, the two things are very much important: the body of your message, and this body of the message which has XML data is put into your envelope that defines your start and end messages, and it is sent over your server, or you can say with the help of the network it is sent to the server. So here I have taken one example of your SOAP message. So first, since it uses an XML language, so here you have to define XML version. So whatever XML version you are going to use, you have to define that. Then this is your SOAP envelope. Okay, so SOAP envelope contains your start and end of the message. So basically, when we are talking about APIs which are going to be implemented over the web, we are going to have the web address, or you can say your website address of what was there into your envelope. Once you're done with this, you're going to encode it. If you want to do any sort of encoding, then you're going to use encoding mechanism, and according to that, you're going to encode it. Next, you have header. This is again an optional. In body, you're going to type the actual message which you want to ask, whatever request you want to make, that have to be made between your open close of the body. Between your open close of the body, you can say there is something called as fault. So in case if you want to add something where you see that always there is a possibility that your, because of network congestion, your processing fields. So if you want to add any fault message, then you can add it. Otherwise, it is optional, so you can leave it blank. But important thing is the content of the body. Whatever request you want to make, that has to be there between your open close of the body. Next is your closing of your body of your envelope, and last is your closing of your envelope. So this is your structure. First step will be your envelope. Second will be your header, which is an optional again. Then comes your body, where you're going to write the request, whatever you want to have. Okay. And then your envelope is closed. So this is your SOAP message structure. So whenever any communication is taking place between the client and server, this structure has to be designed. And with the help of this structure, the request is made and the response is being given to the client with the help of the SOAP structure. Okay. So let us take a quick recap whatever we have done today. So for today lecture, we had started with the topic that is writing a new APIs. So when we talk about writing a new APIs, that refers to writing your customized API. So one of the example which I've taken here of the customized API is a Crocodilo, which is an internet connected task timer, wherein you can set a dial to number of minutes, and as the timer goes down, it tells you and it sends the messages to API server that whether the task has been started, whether it has been completed, or whether it has been cancelled. So you can see that with the help of IoT, now you can have your devices which you just can set a time, and it will help you to track your activities and will help you to track your tasks. So when we talk about Crocodilo, it has some series of the tasks, that is starting a new timer, changing the duration of existing timer, marking a timer at what time it has been completed or what time it has to be completed, and last is cancel a timer. So when we talk about designing an API, at the very first place, you have to design the workflow. Workflow is nothing but interactions between your APIs. So it is categorized into three, that is your task, that is your set of inputs, and the corresponding outputs with respect to the inputs. So here we have taken 7 API workflow, or you can say task, and corresponding inputs and outputs are given. In all the cases, you can see the user and the timer ID is something which is common, because it uniquely identifies the user details along with the time they have set for completing, for starting, or for cancelling the task. So that is something which is common across all your tasks. So here we have taken 7 tasks, that is creating a new time task, changing the duration of the time task, marking the timer complete at what time you want your task to be completed, cancel the timer, describe the time task, get the list of the timers, and get the information about the timer. So here at initial place, we have just designed the workflow, but we have not considered the security aspect of API. And when we talk about security, that is something which is very much required in while you're designing your API, because you're going to connect with anonymous devices. The platform where you are communicating your APIs is the internet. So security is very much important. So to have security implementation into your APIs, you're going to add something called as authentication. So authentication here is going to allow user ID and password, and along with the user ID and password, the MAC address of the device will be also captured. So here it becomes a source of authentication where each user will be uniquely identified, and the MAC address for the each user will also be saved. So here is an additional step which is being added into your APIs with an intention to have a security implementation into your APIs. There are two tasks which have been added here since we are implementing security. One is registering your device to the user. So whenever you want to register your device, you have to log in with your user ID and password, and the inputs which will automatically taken will be your MAC address. So this is something which will be the information which will save against your ID password is your MAC address. So every time when you are connecting, it will automatically check for the MAC address, and it will allow you to use the API. Similarly, if you want to get the details of the user device, all the user device details, so all the information can be get with the ID password of the user, and similarly the output will be the corresponding MAC addresses of the user IDs, users, I mean. Okay. Next is implementation of API. So when we talk about implementation of API, as we all know that API is nothing but the messages which are sent from client and server or from server to client. So that similar mechanism is going to be there for all the standardized protocols, or you can say standardized mechanism which are implementing the APIs. So you have to always have a common architecture where there will be a client who will be always requesting, and there will be the server who is giving the response back. So when you are using different protocols or different standards for implementing the API, only the difference will be the method which they are using to make the request and response. However, the working will going to remain the same. Here we are going to use HTTP request response. In next we are using JSON, then we are using XML, then we are using SOAP. So the protocols which are used for making the request and response are only something which keeps changing on the methods. Okay. However, the actual working of the request and response remains the same in all the standards. Okay. So the very first we are going to start with REST. So when we talk about REST, it stands for representational state transfer. So it represents the different states of your communication. So basically when we talk about the states of transfer of communication between the client and server, it is always going to be two, that is your request and response, where the client is always going to make a request and the server is always going to give the response. So the protocols which are used here for making the request and response is HTTP. Okay. So there are 6 guiding principle of RST. So there is, you can say these are the mandatory things which are required when you are considering RST standard. First, client and server. So the client and server here refers to suppression of client and server so that both of them can work independently and there is no kind of interference between them. So suppression actually helps to store the data, to improvise your scalability, to simplify your server components. You can even have different working at their own place. So separation of client and server is a requirement and it is something which is always advantageous. Second, stateless. So when we talk about stateless, it refers to that whenever a communication is made between the client and server, both of them are not storing any kind of state or they are not storing any kind of information for what they are communicating. Only there is a session information which will be saved from the client end, but from the server end there will be no information with respect to the client will be saved. So stateless here refers to there is no state of information saved at client and server. Whatever they are communicating on the basis of the session, and once the session is over there is no information saved on the server side. Only the client will have the information that when the session has started and when the session has ended. That's it. What was happening in the session, what information is being sent, that the client and server both are unaware of. Third, cacheable. So here we are going to deal with the cache memory of the client and server. So both of them are going to use their cache memory. This will actually help them to improvise the network efficiency. The response and request which will be made from the client and server will be more smooth and it will be more efficient, and it can be easily to scale as well. So anything it needs to be added up, any request to be added up, any additional response to be given from the server side, that can be easily managed and efficiency can be increased with the help of cache memory. Next, fourth is uniform interface. So when we talk about uniform interface, it refers to the, you can say, in the interface through which the client and server is communicating. Mostly the interface which client and server are communicating with each other is your URLs, because that is something of need for the communication with the help of your GUI. So where the client will always make a request and the server will respond back to the request. Fifth is your layered system. So when we talk about layered system, it refers to an additional layer of internet between your client and server, because this is a layer which will help to have an end-to-end communication between your client and server. The responsive will be fast, the interactions will be faster and the delay will be less. So added layer of internet will be something which will help both the client and server to have an effective communication. Last is code on demand. So that is something which is optional and which is done at the client end. So if client wants to have an extended functionality by downloading the code or executing the code in the form of applets, or you can say scripts, so that is possible with REST, because if this functionality is allowed, some of the pre-implemented functionalities which client has to do every time when to connect with the server will be automatically reduced. So with REST, the downloading of the code, implementing of the code after deployment is something which is allowed, and this has actually simplified the many tasks of the client. Next is HTTP request. So whenever any HTTP request is made, there are 4 methods, you can say, which help you to make a request and to interact with the resources which are there into your RST system. So the first is get method. So with the get method, you can get the resources which is there into your RST. But for getting the resource, we need to know the resource ID, because all the resources which are there into your RST system has been assigned a unique resource ID. And with this resource ID, you can get the resources. So at any point of time, if the client want to ask for any specific resource, it has to specify the resource ID which it want to have an access to. Second is a post method. So whenever any new method is posted in REST, that is done with the post method. Similarly, if any resource is something is updated, so that is also done, and that is require resource ID, because there are many resources. So any updation to be made in the resources in REST requires your resource ID. Any resources this needs to be deleted which is of no use now can be done with the delete method. So these are the 4 methods which are used in REST to have an access to the resources which is there into it. Second is JSON RPC. So when we talk about JSON RPC, this is the second method that will help to implement your APIs. So JSON is nothing but JavaScript object notation. So here all the remote procedural calls are made, are encoded with your JSON language, and this actually helps you to have notifications so of everything which is done between your client and server. Even if there is no communication, if there is a drop between the communication between your server and client, each and every notification is being given your by your JSON. So this is something which is always suggested, that if you want to have end-to-end notifications for all your communication between your client and server, you can go with remote procedure call with JSON encoding. Next is XML RPC. As we know, XML is a platform independent. So whenever you're making a remote procedural calls with XML, it actually helps you to establish communication quickly, and it is something which is simplest as well, because most of the web services works on XML. They use XML encoding. So if you're using this combination, it becomes very easy for you to make the remote procedural call to communicate the information between your client and server, and this approach makes the task very easier. Last is SOAP, that stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. So this is a protocol which is again a XML based. So here you're going to use XML as a messaging protocol, which will help you to exchange your information across the computers using your client and server architecture. So it is something which will help you to have a data transport for your web services. It will help you to exchange information across the client and server, and this is something which is platform independent because you are using an XML. So there will be a client, there will be a server, and the information which will be sent from client to server will be done with the help of SOAP envelope. So at the client side, the SOAP envelope will consist of your SOAP body along with the XML data, which defines what messages is being there into it, the start and end of the messages. Similarly, once that SOAP envelope reaches the server, the server is going to use some parameters, and with that parameters, it is going to see the SOAP request. That request is nothing but something which has come from the client. So when we talk about SOAP message, it has 4 things. That is your envelope, header, body, and fault. So envelope is something that defines your start and end of the messages. It is mandatory. You cannot leave it blank. Header is something which is optional. So if you want to add something more into your messages, you can do it with the help of a header. Body is important because it contains your XML data that tells you what is the actual request which is going to be made from the client to server. So this is something which is mandatory and it cannot be left blank. Last is fault. So if you know that any information which you are sending over the network, usually it fails or error occurs, in that case, you can add some optional information into your fault section and you can let the server know that this happens all the time. So this is your SOAP structure that tells you the version of XML which you are using. It tells you the envelope which will help your web pages. Then you have your encoding style. If you want to encode the SOAP envelope, then you can use encoding mechanism. If you don't want, then you can leave it blank. Then you have a SOAP header. If you want to have anything parameters to be added additional, you can do it here. Important is your SOAP body. So your fault comes in your open close of the SOAP body. If you want to add anything, SOAP body contains your actual message which will be sent to the server, and according the request will be fulfilled. Once your SOAP body is closed, after that you are going to close your envelope, which means your envelope contains your actual message, which will be encoding into the XML language, and it will be sent over your server. Okay, so that's it for the day. Thank you, everyone.